There's definitely funds out there. There's always some challenges with dealing with bargaining units. We gave some incentive funds. Trying to give incentive funds has been a little bit of a challenge with one of our bargaining units, but we do whatever we can to help support them, pay for mileage. The grant gives the district a portion of funds, $2,500, and we always give that back to the candidates. We don't use any of those funds for ourselves. So we do whatever we can. Para wages are not big bucks. So whatever we can do to help support them, we do.
Thanks so much, Deanna. And Tony, would you also respond to that question from your perspective? And if you could also speak to some of those relationships that you form as part of that work as well, I think that would be really interesting to hear more about.
Yeah, I can do that. The alt route pathway that we partner with Wazoo on is conceptually brilliant. You take your own staff that are already embedded in programs and get them pedagogy so they're ready to go and be teachers. The logistics internally are often choppier because paraeducators have day jobs and there are internal logistical challenges that require the village to work together. I have a special ed paraeducator that has to come out of special education and do some gen ed student teaching time because that's part of the programming. The indirect cost to that is the cost of subs for the paraeducator who's out on assignment, because we have to walk that fine line in supporting a pipeline to get teachers while not, blowing up student supports in classrooms. Some of our paraeducators work with some of our most challenging kiddos that need that direct daily interaction. And when we start pulling paraeducators in and out to try to get their practicum or student teaching time finished, it can become a complicated thing. Not every principal loves seeing their program usurped in their building because of needs for a credentialing program. So there's a lot of capacity work we do within our own system to try to keep an eye on the prize. The prize is, and what I tell principals is they'll like it even less when we post a special ed job in their building and don't have any candidates. So they've got to take a little to get a little in terms of the staffing part of it. But I think that's what I think we were surprised about as we got into this journey is just some of the unforeseen logistical issues in a big district of making sure that the candidates get what they need while we can still run the place and have school. Because those aren't as obviously intuitive as the great idea of growing your own pipeline.
Thanks for sharing that, Tony. And Kim, I'll pass that question to you. And then after that, Julia, instead of posing that question to you, is it fine if I move to the next? Okay, cool. So Kim, go ahead.
Well, I think that Julia and I chatted. Julia, why don't you take this one and then we'll adopt time that way.
Okay, I'm happy to take this one. And to some degree, I think all of the questions run together in my mind a little bit. So the first thing I'll say is that, and again, this is credit due to Rachel Oppenheim, who's here. We have 2 full-time faculty at our university that are dedicated entirely to this program. Myself, I direct the program, and we have a field director whose job it is to really think specifically about the student teaching component. And then in addition, we also, all of our classes are classes that only have students in this particular program, and they are designed specifically for students in this program. In addition, we also have university field instructors paid for by our university who follow student teaching candidates or teacher candidates and visit them 15 times in person when not in COVID in their placements throughout the course of the year. So there's a lot of institutional support, and there was a lot of work that went into making our institution put sort of its money where its mouth is in terms of saying, we believe that this program needs to exist, and we believe that we therefore need to provide the support to make the program successful. And one thing I will say is that, we try to walk the walk in terms of saying, just like schools are typically designed to support a certain student, a white, monolingual, cisgender, heterosexual student, most teacher programs are as well. And we try really hard to fundamentally rethink what our program program looks like, so that we're not kind of putting band-aids on things and saying, well, we'll change the class in this small way. We're trying to fundamentally shift the structure of teacher preparation to meet our students where they are, our teacher candidates where they are. And most of our teacher candidates are people who were not, by traditional measures, by normative measures, successful in US public schools, or went to school in another country or had interrupted schooling. And those are the people we really believe we need as teachers. And so we really try, both in the structure of our program and the supports we provide, in the structure of our courses and the way we think about our program, to imagine and meet the students we have where they are and honor who they are and all that they're going to bring. So I think there's a lot of telling our institution repeatedly, you said you wanted this program to be successful. You said we want to be part of changing who gets to be a teacher in this country and in Kent in particular. Let's put the resources behind that and actually make a program that can do that. And I think Kim and Kent and Will have really sort of mirrored that in terms of helping us create a program that does things differently and that provides a really unusual degree of support to our teacher candidates.
Thank you for sharing that, Julia. And that actually touches on the next question. You've kind of answered a little bit of it from your perspective, so that's great. And that question is, how do your relationships and partnerships center the diversity of the communities, of your communities, and how do you include historically excluded from education? And Kim, I'll pass that to you first.
Well, a lot of this, on our perspective, comes to how we support the program through recruitment and communication and connecting candidates to Antioch. From the program perspective, I know Julia will speak to it more, removing some of those traditional barriers that might prohibit a candidate from being able to access the program. Specifically from the district perspective, that comes in funding and just ways that we can look at things creatively. I was excited to hear, Deanna, that you utilize Title II funds as well. We also use Title II and Title III funds to supplement the program, as well as through the Alternative Routes Block Grant. And we do that through various measures. Mainly, and I think the most impactful, is with sub coverage. And so we actually do, in a traditional year, bring in subs for our candidates so they can truly embed the experience within their workday. And so we bring in that extra coverage, and hopefully we align in most scenarios, but sometimes it's not possible, but in most scenarios we align their program within their building, and so they're able to experience their student teaching and their practicum within their workday, which is pretty exceptional, and it removes a large financial piece. They remain fully employed, fully paid, fully benefited employees while they're going through the program. There's no leaves that are needed or any additional like accommodations as far as work goes. Julia can speak a little bit more to a few more things on the program side.
Do you want me to speak to that, Musda, or do you want me to wait and let others talk, and then I can add if there's time?
Yeah, if that's all right. I was thinking I'll pass to Lindsay and then circle back. Lindsay, I'll pass that question to you.
Okay. And just, can I refresh what the question was?
Yes, absolutely. That's my bad. So
that's okay.
How do your relationships and partnerships center the diversity of your communities and include those who have been historically excluded?
Great, thank you for refreshing me on that. Yeah, in our work with students, WSU Tri-Cities is a campus that really works a lot with first generation college students. We're the most diverse campus in the WSU system. A lot of the students who are interested in taking part in the alternative route already kind of know of WSU's Tri-Cities relationship and ethos that way. And on campus, people are really, used to working with students who are working. We have a number of resources on campus that we can draw on in supporting students as they go through the program. So for instance, during student teaching, we've had students who use the campus food pantry be able to make their orders and place them so that they can pick them up when they come to campus for student teaching seminars, so that they still have that resource available to them even during the student teaching time. As Kim was mentioning, you know, that opportunity to be able to do the practicum and student teaching, like it's probably one of the hardest parts of this program is figuring out how to make that work in real life. And that's where that partnership with the district really, really comes in handy. That's also where some of the funding flexibility that we have or money from the alternative route block grant can really come in useful when we can take some of that burden off of candidates from you know, backgrounds where they're raising a family, you know, they're trying to balance, you know, being a single parent with going to school, you know, being able to do their practicum and student teaching and know that they're still going to be able to have their benefits, that they're going to be able to do things within their support system that they already have at school and at work, where they don't have to, you know, leave the building to go student teach somewhere else. Those are all things that I think really add up to having an atmosphere of support for candidates.
Thanks for speaking to that, Lindsay. And I'm hearing a lot from each of you about like mitigating that financial burden that can come with being a full-time student and also allowing people to still remain a part of that. That's really huge. Deanna and Tony, I have the same question for you. Which of you, or I guess Deanna, you're already unmuted, so I'll pass that to you first. Perfect.
I think the big part of it, at least for us as in Prosser as a community, we have a couple of barriers that make it challenging sometimes for us to find teachers, or we lose teachers. One is housing is really expensive in Prosser. And so a lot of time, many of our new young teachers live in the Tri-Cities and commute. And when salary schedules changed, that became a big barrier for us. And we lost a lot of teachers. Tony likes to hire our teachers. Yeah, shame on him. He should send me at least a finder's fee or something. We struggled. So that's one of the big things about this grant is you're looking for people who are in your community, you're already working in your school. And your paraeducators, for the most part, don't commute from outside of, at least for us, don't commute from outside of your community. So we're getting people who are in our community, invested in our community, and reflective of our community. We find those great paras that, I was a building principal for a long time. You have those paras, you're like, you could be a teacher without even going to school. Like they just have that gift. And so really looking to find strong people who are reflective of our student community, which has been a challenge for us as well. So that's really has helped to shift and have good, strong role models, that are more reflective of our student population. And we reassign people into different jobs. We've principals create new creative para schedules. We have also hired subs. There's a lot of things we do to support them, because the last thing we need them to worry about is not having a job, because it's already really challenging and stressful, because they're working full time, they're going to school full time. Thank goodness no more at TPA. Woohoo! We can all celebrate that. But there's a lot on their plate, and so and many of our candidates have children. There's a lot going on. So all the things that people are talking about here, and just I think the biggest thing is letting these people know that you have confidence in them and you believe in them, that they can do it. Because sometimes nobody's ever tapped them on the shoulder and said, hey, I think you'd be a great teacher. Have you ever thought about it? And so often they have, but they just didn't think maybe they could do it. So.
Thanks, Deanna. And Tony, I'll pass that to you. And I also want to acknowledge, Susanna, your question in the chat. That's a really great question. And I might tag that on to the final question that is related to what you're asking for the panelists. So thank you, and we'll come back to that soon. Tony, go ahead.
I think our discussion has been even a little more global about this particular topic than just the Alt Routes grant. What we've noticed in our district is an increasingly diverse student body, and less so on the faculty and staff side. And we're seeing that discrepancy widen, and we struggle a little bit with recruiting teachers of color and diversity into our school for a variety of different reasons. And so the discussion that we've had is if we have a diverse student body and we don't have as diverse a staff, do we double down on an alternative routes process to grow our own paraeducators out of our kids and double down on the pathway to work them towards teaching? If we struggle with recruiting, then we got to look within. A place we've talked about is using Avid to start that discussion. First generation college kids that have gone to our schools, some of our schools with lower socioeconomics, that understand our community, understand our culture. They graduate from high school, we hire them into a paraeducator role, they get trained in that role over time, then they can move towards their degree and get their certification, and really double down on the idea that we have our own pipeline for teaching. Because if we are not as successful as I think I would like in recruiting out, the only other option is to recruit in. And a diverse student body which is crying out for support. This is one way we just theoretically kicked around doing that. I think we're probably at 40,000 feet there instead of 10,000 feet in terms of what that would look like to operationalize. But that's the discussion we've been having is how do you leverage the resources we do have to grow our own and change that dynamic?
Yeah, thanks, Musta. I've been echoing Julia, and I'm seeing what Marcia put in the chat and kind of trying to pull it in. At WSU as a whole, and especially at WSU Tri-Cities, we have been having conversations about justice for a long time. And so, Susanna, as you're mentioning in there, how are we talking about social justice and diversity and linguistic diversity in our programs? These are things that get woven into our various methods classes, and we've been trying to work in more in our textbooks. I think one approach that has infused into other classes is thinking about students' funds of knowledge. And so in our curriculum, I think we've been working a lot with our teacher candidates about how to consider our students' funds of knowledge, families' funds of knowledge. How can we learn about those community resources to be able to bring in and use in instruction? And I think for us, some of the work that we have had to do as a program and as a faculty is to think about our pre-service teachers as learners and the fact that they have their own funds of knowledge and things that they bring in. And I think that's really one opportunity with the alternative route is getting to know candidates. For us, we're a Route 1 program, so we have people for 2 years. And many times I've worked with students, I've worked with Deanna and Tony and other people on recruiting students over multiple years. And we get to know them and some of the things that they bring in, including some of those assets and connections in the community. And I think some of that as a faculty is really thinking, how do we access those students' funds of knowledge and those funds of identity and help them to kind of make that jump from being a paraeducator to being a teacher, because they are bringing in these experiences as paras, or because they have this rather deep knowledge of the school as a community, of the district as a community, and what they can bring to bear. So that's probably been some of the challenge that we've had, and some of the growth areas that we've been doing as faculty is, really how do we acknowledge for alternative route students, but for all of our pre-service teachers, that they have these funds of knowledge, they have this community cultural wealth that they bring in along with them.
Thanks, Lindsay. And Tony, if you would respond next.
I think Lindsay said it pretty well. I don't have a ton extra to add to that. I think some of our discussions has been the professional and the career continuum. It's an investment, and the return on that investment is positive learning experiences for kids with a supported staff that's embedded in, in familiar with our system. What I see specifically in special ed, I think that's where it really manifests itself, is inconsistency in program due to staff turnover. You know, if we're going to back up to what's the root cause of the problem that we're trying to address as a system is stability staffing in a department, then you work backwards from that to find and invest in people to bring that work home. But that's what we've been talking about, is starting with the kids part of this. We believe we can leverage some CTE money in terms of career exploration in an education setting and use some of that funding to put together a cohort of kids over time and invest moving forward in that way.
Thanks, Tony. So we have about 5 minutes left. Oh, and the clock just changed to 4. So I actually, Deanna and Kim, is it okay if I don't pose that last question to you, and instead, would you be willing? So there's a question from Jason in the chat that I think connects to what we're discussing, and Julie, you kind of already addressed this as well. But if you all could speak to whether and which partnerships you are forming with community-based organizations to identify and support. And also, you know, I'm just thinking, like, in consideration of education institutions being primarily white institutions, and how community-based organizations and their voice and power in that context can be important, are important to this work.
So a requirement of the grant is that the paraeducator has experience working in the classroom. So partnering for support, I mean, we have a lot of great community organizations. We have some really good community organizations in Prosser who are also able to support if someone's struggling. But I think that we aren't necessarily able to go find candidates from community organizations unless we're finding them, like encouraging them, which we are doing right now all the time. Come and work for us. Come and try it out. Be a sub. You know, see if you like working with kids. It's very challenging right now, and I'm sure that Kim and Tony can attest to this, to even find people to come and work right now. So finding those people that are working for you and are doing a great job is fantastic, is really fantastic. And partnering with a university, like for us with WSU, that really designed a program to meet the needs of paraeducators, which are very different from a high school kid coming out of college, coming into college and wanting to become a teacher because of those experiences. So for us in Prosser, we have some organizations that we work with, but not necessarily to recruit new teachers.
Thank you. And Kim, I'll pass that to you.
Yeah, so at this point, we have not used any outside recruitment, honestly, because we haven't needed to. We've had extremely high response to this program. This year was more challenging as far as recruitment goes than typical years. But I would say that we only are able to admit approximately half of the candidates who show interest, just due to space. And so it hasn't been a challenge yet. However, we're still creatively thinking about how we can continue to expand and kind of be more intentional about the recruitment. One of the ways that I plan on doing that is by actually like working within the schools and talking to our administrators about candidates that are those exceptional candidates. Removing the perception that it's out of somebody's grasp to become a teacher is a challenge. And I think regularly we hear that people just didn't think it was possible. They didn't think that the program would apply to them. And so communication and just kind of continuing that forward-facing work within our buildings and working with those exceptional employees to let them know that it is within their grasp, that we're there to help partner with them to achieve this goal, that we are willing to invest in them to continue to serve our students. I think that is where we are right now as far as recruitment goes for our program.
Thanks so much, Kim. So we've got just a minute left. So instead of posing a question and then asking you to talk wildly fast, I want to thank all of our Julia, Deanna, Tony, and Lindsay for sharing and speaking about what you all are doing and how y'all are growing as individuals to serve our students and our teachers in more equitable and inclusive ways. And to your point, Julia, there's no arrival with this work. It is ongoing, and I think that's such a huge part of it, is the recognition of that. And so I will say, I would love conversation going. There's a networking hour near the end of today, so you can get the link for that and information about that in the program. And there's a little less structure, so there'll be time for you to kind of delve in further for the things that you are most interested in discussing further. So thank you all so much. And thank you to our audience.